In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about one of the probably the most influential hacks that have happened this year, which is the MGM hack. Let's get started, and let's get started now. Now, the MGM group is probably one of the largest hospitality groups in Las Vegas. In fact, you would see that most of the casinos and hotels on the Las Vegas Strip are owned by the MGM group, and they're probably one of the most influential in that area. In fact, the world famous Black Hat Conference, where I train and speak every year, happens in one MGM hotel as well. And of course, I'm sure if you've been to Vegas, you probably would have stayed in or probably have been to one of their hotels. Now, they are obviously a very large group of hotels. They have a lot of rooms. They have a lot of different operations. Their operations span quite a few things because they also not only have the resort, the hotel part of the whole thing, they also have gambling and they have machines and all of that infrastructure as well. They have a whole bunch of things that obviously run basically through IT and software. And obviously, this attack was something that was completely crippled them. That basically, this attack caused a massive outrage for all hotels that were related, or MGM Group hotels. Of course, I am not directly responsible for, I've not been associated with this investigation or anything like that in any way. I'm just reading stuff that's out in the news and I'm coming to you with this information. I don't have any additional information or context as to what's going on. There's a good chance that we'll get to know more details in the days that come, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of understanding of what possibly has happened. And of course, I will probably keep you posted as things unravel as to whether things have changed or whether things have become more complicated, less complicated, what have you. So, let's start with what happened. So, on the weekend, which is the 8th of September, there was this outage in MGM and this was a weekend, and obviously a lot of incidents in the US typically happen over the weekend. You will see that attackers seem to plan and love messing with IT folks weekends quite extensively because I think it makes sense from an attacker's perspective as well, because weekend is when the people most at ease or most, probably will be ignoring some of this stuff. So this happened during the weekend where basically they have done something, and I'll get to what that something is in a little bit. They've done something and it basically has crippled MGM's entire network. People were not able to access their rooms, their booking systems are down, their gaming floors were completely shut off. They had a complete outage in terms of their operations. All the things you could imagine that have gone wrong with the resort and the casinos have gone wrong. So pretty much the whole thing was shut off. The reason for this apparently then was traced was that during the previous week sometime, there was a call that was made to their L1 help desk. Their L1 help desk is offshore somewhere else. Now, this is the help desk that people typically call when they've lost access to something and they want to get access to something, or they've forgotten something, maybe something related to their hardware device, maybe their laptop is not working. It's a typical help desk operation that I'm sure you might have known. If you work in a large enough company, there's a good chance that you have a help desk and you need to deal with that help desk, especially when it comes to, things like access being shut off or your laptop not working or some application not working, things like that. So they received a call on their L1 help desk, and the person said that their phone was lost. That's why they were not able to get their multi-factor authentication code, and apparently looked like they sounded convincing enough that the help desk person reset their access and also gave them a temporary code for their multi-factor authentication so that they can access and get access to their account. Now, this was access to their Okta account. So their Okta environment was accessible publicly, and this person was given access to multi-factor authentication. They were obviously through that able to get into that person's account. Now, turns out that person was actually an Okta global administrator. And I don't know where you come from, but if I hear the term global administrator, I'm sure it's not a low privilege role. Okta global administrator, if you look at it, obviously you have a lot of privilege, and from there, Okta was obviously linked to their Azure as well as their VMware ESXi stack that was also linked to Okta logins. So it probably is likely that someone who got access to this massively privileged account, and from that massively privileged account, they were able to pretty much tunnel their access into anything else because they were global admin. Probably that means that they were able to access a whole bunch of things, including Azure, and obviously a lot of their critical servers probably ran on Azure, and their ESXi stack, which was running VMware, they were probably able to access that through the Okta compromise. Now, again, it was not really a compromise so much as it was a social engineering attack, but this actually points to a whole bunch of things. Now, what could have happened at this point in time? They probably have a ransomware scenario happening. They probably have, I don't know whether it's wiperware, ransomware. I think details are yet to emerge. And I believe there's also some information from the group that compromised them that said that once they discovered that we were in there, they turned off their Okta synchronization or something like that. And from that point on, you will see that it actually got worse because the outage essentially spread. At the same time, these people, while they did lose temporary access to the account, I don't know whether the attackers are still inside their environment. I don't know what that situation is. But this was the crux of the scenario. This was what really happened. Now, let's see what exactly was the outage. What really happened because of this? Obviously, if somebody gets access to a global administrator on Okta, which means that they can do a whole bunch of things, which means their gaming was down. Obviously, a ton of money comes from their gaming environment, their gaming floors. Was gone. Restaurants could not accept credit cards. Obviously, the point of sale seems to have been affected. ATMs were not working. Room keys not functioning. In fact, there was this video on Twitter of a lady saying that she could get into the elevator and get access to any floor she wanted. And that was a huge security breach because most of these hotels have so many floors that they're not supposed to allow people to just willy-nilly access any floor. The person should only access the floor that they have authorization to. And apparently that was down as well. Huge check-in lines. I've been to MGM hotels. They already have pretty large check-in lines, but this obviously made it untenable. Also, aside from all of this amazing stuff that's happened, they've had massive data theft. Social security numbers seem to have been stolen. Driver's license information seems to have been stolen. In fact, MGM employees' logins seem to have been circulating on dark web forums, which is great because this is probably means that likely to have a longer-term compromise, if any. I'm not sure, again, about this, but this is what has so far happened. Now, let's talk a little bit about what could have possibly happened and maybe look at some potential solutions for this. Obviously, I know that there is going to be this initial reaction. How could they be so stupid? But remember, that's not the point here. Compromises happen all the time. It's important for us to not blame the victims, in this case, the MGM group, and focus on the actual things that we can take away from this so that we can help ourselves, we can help our organizations get more secure. So let's look at that next. One of the things, like I said, the first thing we need to think about is why did this happen and what could have prevented this or maybe even detected this once it starts to happen. So let's talk a little bit about the why part just to kind of fill in the blanks. Now, the reason why this happened was obviously because somebody was able to socially engineer their access to Okta, and that person happened to be an extremely privileged user who was able to access their Okta environment, get access to an account, and through that account they were able to gain access to a whole bunch of things. Now, there could be a possibility, again, I don't know this, but there could be a possibility that a lot of people had global admin or very high privileges in Okta. Now remember, when you have services like single sign-on services like Okta and so on, they're great in terms of centralizing the service, federating the service, that's all great. But there's also the possibility that if a high privileged account gets compromised, that is a complete compromise because these services have access to everything, and by design they're given access to everything. So when you are deploying single sign-on services like Okta and so on, there needs to be some additional threat modeling and thought process put into how users are identified, how many admins should be there, how can users access this service. All of that stuff needs to be in place. I think a lot more thought needs to be given. I'm not saying they didn't put in that thought, but certainly it appears like that was one of the big issues that they have. So probably a large number of global admins, one of the likely issues that has happened. The other thing that possibly might have happened was simply because they did MFA resets over the phone. Now, the user identification part of it, especially in a help desk scenario, needs to be a little bit more robust. And MFA has become used in several different attacks. We've seen this in attacks in the past as well. We've seen how somebody was trying to bombard an employee with MFA requests and that person just gave in after some time, and after that they realized that they were able to compromise that account. So a lot of people just assume that MFA is great, MFA is super secure. Because you have MFA, you are much better off than anybody else. But there is a possibility where somebody can leverage social engineering, old school social engineering, to do something like this. So this is something to think about. How you identify employees when they want to reset things, when they have MFA resets is something that you need to think about, especially over the phone. The additional thing is around IAM in general. Maybe think about having certificate-based authentication for accessing certain type of resources, especially single sign-on, especially on company devices. There are lots of things you can potentially do for that. You can have single sign-on, but you can have VPNs, you can have, certificate-based authentication. You can probably have some kind of identity-aware proxies that you can set up for access to certain types of applications. So that may be one thing. And probably have some kind of additional RBAC separation between critical infrastructure and administrative logging. This is something that I would think you can potentially do. This is one of those areas that I think could be something that they can think about and you can think about when you are deploying these kind of systems. Now, aside from all this, I really think that you should use this in incident management or incident response as to what happened. So if you have this kind of a stack where you're using Okta and things like that, think about how you would be affected by something like this. You can run incident response simulations, tabletops, put this into your threat model or update your threat model for certain apps that you have, and that would probably help you define your requirements a whole lot better based off of this. Again, like I said, all of these incidents are things we can learn from. So the best thing you can do at this point in time is to not victim blame, not make snarky comments on the internet about how they've been affected, but maybe think about how you can improve your own security. So this is something that I have. I hope this was useful. If you like this sort of content, please subscribe to this channel and you'll get a lot more of this sort of useful content. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.